Welcome to the Necessary Entrepreneur Podcast, where we dive deep into the stories and strategies of the visionaries shaping the business world today. I'm thrilled to introduce our esteemed guest, Richard Ross, the dynamic CEO of Quinn Residences. Quinn Residences is a real estate operating company focused on acquiring, developing, and operating dedicated rental communities in the Southeast United States. With a career spanning 4 decades in the real estate industry, Richard Ross continues to use his knowledge and expertise to fulfill Quinn Residences' mission of creating inclusive communities that enhance residents' lives and make quality housing more accessible. Since starting in 2020, Quinn Residences has grown its portfolio to over 5,200 homes in 39 communities. During the conversation, we discussed the population of renters by choice, the no-maintenance lifestyle, and what fun means. Stick around as Richard talks about not having a relationship with regret, the trust your gut philosophy, and doing the next thing right. Hey, Richard Ross, CEO. Boy, I just love that term on the Necessary Entrepreneur. CEO of Quinn Residences, which is out of Atlanta, Georgia, I believe. And is that correct? Am I starting this off wrong?
You got it, Mark. Atlanta, GA. Hot Atlanta right now.
You're a true Southerner, man, a Southeast guy. You got your Bachelor of Science in Accounting from the University of Florida. Have an entire journey of being an employee places before you jumped out more an entrepreneur, building Quinn Residences, which today, I believe, maybe you had another acquisition or built some more homes, but 5,200 homes in 39 communities.
That's correct.
All right.
Throughout the Southeast.
Okay. So before we talk about your awesomeness of business, I've been pumped about this conversation. I'm not going to do any gotcha questions today, but I could, because you're talking about a real estate broker sitting here talking to an owner of rental communities. And I think this could be a heck of a collaborative conversation. But I first want to know about Richard.
What can I tell you? You want me to go back? How far you want me to go back? Back to the beginning?
When your dad's a builder and he probably made you build stairwells. And
No, so my father was a home builder in the 50s and 60s in West Palm Beach, Florida. And of course, Florida was booming back then, and he did very well building basically homes for GIs coming back from Korea, 3-bedroom homes. And he built the entire city of North Palm Beach. When I say the entire city, he built the schools, he built the sewage treatment plant, he built the police station. That's what land developers did way back then. Very successful. And then in the early 70s, let's say 71, he decided, and my Uncle Dick, my namesake, his brother, they were partners in this business. And they decided they were going to build a high-rise condo on Singer Island. And so went to the bank, got a construction loan, built, a 20-story condo tower. And then, as happens in the real estate business, some economic thing happened. At this point, it was the oil embargo of 72. So they found themselves with a condo building that was empty and couldn't sell, and had signed personally on a construction loan. And that really devastated my father. He was not able to pay that loan, had to file bankruptcy. And so I was now 15 years old, so an impressionable young adolescent. And I said, well, I'm never going to go through that. So I'm going to become a CPA, and let's become a professional where I know I always have a job and an income. So that's kind of how I went when I went to the University of Florida and majored in accounting. That's why I majored in accounting.
Every time I hear someone, they say they're an accountant, I'm like, this is going to be a boring conversation. But
it didn't last long, Mark. So I left the University of Florida. And again, instead of going back to Miami, where I was raised, I was born in West Palm, raised in Miami. I didn't want to start my career under the shadow of my father, who was involved in the community, and I won't say an icon, but he was well known. I wanted to sort of chart my own course. So I moved to Atlanta. I actually had a buddy in Atlanta who had graduated before me. I went up to visit him. Atlanta was booming, still is, but this is early 80s now. We're in 81, 82. And I was like, wow, I want to live here. So I started my first job at Price Waterhouse, big international accounting firm. That lasted 2 years, which is what was required to get my CPA certificate. And yeah, several people told me I did not fit the accountant mold. Having said that, I then went out and hung a shingle and started my own accounting practice. And that lasted almost 8 years until my children got to an age 7 and 9 where I was working too many hours and not being a part of their upbringing. So I sold that business, and we'll get into what happened after that, which is how the real estate DNA took over.
Yeah, let's get into that, because it's fascinating that until you were 15, you saw entrepreneurship right on the front face of everything happening with your family. It was the foundation of your family.
Yeah.
And then you go and get your accounting degree, and then you start your own gig after you work for 2 years to get your CPA. So there's entrepreneurship in your blood. There's running things in your blood. There's an operator. But then there's also things about the reality of life at times. And you went to work for someone else and became an employee.
Yep.
How long did that last?
Well, 2 years. 2 years and a day. I think I left Price Waterhouse because you needed 2 years of work experience to get your CPA certificate. So I went to work after that for somebody else and met a guy. So I went to another accounting firm, met a guy, and we hung a shingle literally. So within 3 years of that first job, I was an employee for 3 years. We hung a shingle and built a practice to, 4 partners, 30 employees, did really well in a town, as I said, Atlanta, that was booming. But then family, became critical to me. So I quit and I sold my practice to my partner and took some time off and found myself wanting to do something. Called a buddy who I'd worked with prior, and he said, "Hey, I have this company that's going public, filing an initial public offering. They might need some help, someone like you with your background." And I went. I thought it was going to be a couple weeks. That 2 weeks turned into 2 years. We filed. This was a real estate company. This is when all the big apartment companies today, so 30 years ago, we're now in 93, were formed. The ones everybody knows, at least if you're in the real estate business, Equity Residential, Camden Property Trust, Avalon Bay, all these big mega apartment owners were sort of formed in the early 90s. And this one was called Post Properties, based out of Atlanta, garden style, Class A, what is typical now, apartment building. And that 2 weeks turned into 2 years. And that sort of activated the real estate DNA. And I've been in that business in some form or fashion for the last 30 years.
So early 90s, and we jump way forward to you starting your own gig here in Quinn Residences and being the CEO. What'd you learn from 1993 to when you decide to go out and create this venture? What'd you learn that prepared you for this?
Wow, a lot. I would say the biggest lesson was as you go through your career. So I started in the real estate business in the early 90s. I was in my mid 30s, right? Mm-hmm. To now I'm 65 years old. So for the last 30 years, the biggest lesson was you never know who you're going to meet later in your career. So always treat people with respect and dignity and don't burn any bridges. And I have several examples, and I try and communicate this to all the people that I work with my team, with people who come to me saying, like you, what have you learned? The most important lesson. That's it. And I'll share one story with you that brings that point home, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So, middle of my career, I was another consultant for a pump company that was trying to go public. We're now in 2013. And they asked me to become the CFO of this now public company. It's a big job, you sign things and the SEC checks you out and background checks and all that. And so when the board of directors, I would be reporting to, was hiring me and interviewing me, they were doing background checks. Unbeknownst to me, they talked to three people that I didn't know these conversations were happening. One was a lawyer who, one of the board members had a friend who knew a lawyer who I had worked with on this first gig back in the early 90s. So we're talking 20 years before. Yeah, 20 years before. I'm make up names here. Joe calls Bill and says, "Bill, do you know this guy, Richard Ross?" And he says, "Yeah, he's a decent guy." I don't know that this call is being made, by the way, 20 years ago. Another guy went to church with somebody another board member went to church with somebody who he knew me. Same call happens. Do you know this guy? He's a decent guy. And the third was a guy I had worked with before. And one of the guys on the team that was trying to hire me knew that I had worked for this guy, called his buddy. They were buddies, and said, "Do you know this guy, Richard Ross?" And he said, "Yeah, he's a decent guy." So 3 calls happened, Mark. I don't know these calls are happening. Any one of those calls is a no. I don't get the job, and I don't know why. So all of those relationships that you build, those people you meet, you never know when someone is going to make that kind of phone call.
Do you do that same thing today as a CEO when you're hiring people?
Yeah, if I see something on a resume or a company or some past experience and I have a connection, because over 30 years in this business, real estate's very small. People think it is a huge industry, right? But it's a very small insular community, so everybody does sort of know everybody. So if I see something in somebody's background and I have a Kevin Bacon connection, right, a 6 degree of separation, then I call that person and I say, "Hey, do you know Sue? And what do you think about Sue?" And Sue doesn't know that I'm making these calls, by the way, because
they never do.
People give references, and of course they're going to give you good references. So yes, I do. I tell that story to a lot of people, and I say, "Look, you just, even if you don't you're not going to like everybody in business. You're going to have people you disagree with, whether it's a personality conflict or an ethical conflict or moral dilemma. You just don't need to be dismissive or disrespectful. You can agree to disagree, right? And so don't burn the bridge. That's the moral of the story."
But there's a book that says burn the boats.
Yes.
Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't. I've heard of it. I don't think I've read it.
It's a whole different philosophy, though. It's on a whole. But I was like, if we're talking about burning wooden things, unless we're talking about metal, let's go. Now that's the idea about going all in and not having a backup plan.
Right.
If you're going to go to the island, burn the boat so you can't go back. What type of philosophy outside of treating people well with just basic general respect as a CEO with leadership? What's a general philosophy that maybe even have in your personal life that's really important to you? That I read. Yet you love spending time outdoors and spending time with your daughter and going on hikes and stuff. So you're a dad, you're a CEO, you're a friend. You have all these different relationships. Is there like an approach in life that carries over from personal to business and back and forth that really sets true to who you are?
Yeah, I would say, and this is more of a life lesson and learned not through experience, and that's trust your gut, right? We all have intuition, feelings. I've had probably hundreds of instances, but a couple I can think of. I won't get into details, where my gut said, no. And that might be hiring somebody or working with somebody or partnering with somebody or even a branch of business, right? Should we, let's just say in rental homes, should we be putting fitness centers in our rental homes? Or should I be hiring this woman or young man? And your gut says, no. But then everybody else, all this words are coming in, oh, she's great, she's wonderful. And oh, wow, look at this background, it's perfect. But yet your gut's telling you, no. And I have allowed other things to override that, and I don't do that anymore. Meaning if I say this: if I get a no inside, it's a no.
It's a no.
Yeah, and
You've learned to
generally,
rely on that. Go ahead.
Well, you just have to have the conviction to believe that, and I think some of that, for me at least, came from life experience and
Getting
saying,
burned.
well, yeah, but, and then you make a decision that you know is wrong, and then 6 months, 9 months, a year, hopefully later, you say, ooh, made the wrong decision. Yeah.
Before we jump into your innovative way and approach to rentals and building your business, there's a big debate going on right now around the value of education in our country.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you can compare them or say which one's more important, but let's have a conversation around experience versus education.
Yeah, I would say I'm sort of middle of the road, meaning I believe in an education, particularly higher education, as long as it's pursued with a bigger goal in mind, right? I majored in accounting. I got a professional degree. That degree has served me very well. People say accounting is the language of business, but I have colleagues who've been very successful and they have law degrees, or they might have economic degrees, or something that gives you what college did for me is obviously I got the technical background in accounting, but it also taught me how to learn, right? And you never stop learning in those. At least I don't believe you should. So I have 25-year-old employees that teach me something, every day. But a university education does teach you how to learn, how to study, how to become a master of something. Having said that, nothing. There's no substitute for life experience, particularly as we've talked about. But also business experience, trying and failing, believing in something, and it didn't work, or believing in something and having success. So I think it's both. I have a story, a very recent story. I have a grandson who's 19, and he chose to join the military in lieu of going to college. And yes, I was biased about going to college, and I said to him, why do you not want to go to college? And he calls me Poppy. And he said, Poppy, I don't want to come out of college with debt. He's 19 today. And he said, I have friends that have debt, and, the Army's going to pay me a bonus to sign up. They're going to pay me. They're going to teach me a trade. I'm going to get out. I'm going to have a trade. I will get paid the whole time I'm there. And I'll have a really good skill when I get out of.
Someone raised a critical thinker.
Yeah. And I was like, how can you argue with that? Right. And, so there's an example where, okay, I get it.
Doing it a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
So it seems to be that you're doing things a different way. And I have this philosophy that if you're going to start a business, I really don't think you're doing yourself or the marketplace a service if you just do the same thing the same way that everybody else has done it. If that's the case, just let them do it. There's nothing special about you. And so it seems that you're in agreement with that. Because when you start at Quinn Residences, it seems that you're really trying to innovate and do some different things. So I'm not the guy who's like, hey, Richard, come on and just market your business and let's talk about how amazing you are. But I love innovation. I love a new way of looking at things. If you see a problem in the marketplace, I love our capitalistic system where if there's an opportunity, go make some money. But I also love if you're going to fill a need or a void to elevate the benefits to consumers in a different way. So it sounds like you're doing things a really different way.
Well, truth be told, Mark, the Quinn opportunity came to me from an acquaintance, a guy I did business with. In this the story I told about being the board of directors making these 3 phone calls, the equity, the capital behind that company. 10 years later, again, don't burn a bridge, called me and said, Richard, I have this business plan. I found it. It sounds intriguing. I've looked at it. I'd like to invest in this business, but I need somebody that I trust, first and foremost, that can run it and build it into something unique. And that was the business plan, literally a 30-page PowerPoint presentation.
How old were you when that happened?
Well, it was 5 years ago. So I was
60 years old.
And I was thinking,
Come back
Mark,
to
Yeah, I was thinking about retiring. Like I was on a
Yeah.
glide path to retire, and I got this business plan. I looked at it. I had heard about this business, but not. I've been in the real estate business in both apartments, multifamily as we call it, and grocery anchored shopping centers. So I knew the real estate business, but this was this new build to rent sort of thought process. So I didn't come up with the idea, but I saw this business plan. I recognize it as wow. This is something that, given all the things that are going on in this country, and we can get into talking about those, I'd really like to sort of end my career. And this was also a chance to be the CEO, right? The top dog. And because I've always been a CFO, and this was an opportunity to really build something from scratch. I was employee number one. No one had done this. There was a blank chalkboard other than this sort of business plan about here's this industry that may, or this idea that may or may not work.
We won't dig into personal finances and all that stuff too much, but what I know about opportunities in this world, everything you had done, it goes back to the story about people calling references. Everything you had done up until 60 created that call.
Yep, for sure.
And thousands of decisions, thousands of choices. They didn't all have to be perfect, but they all mattered. And it's an equity play. It doesn't matter what you're getting paid. What an opportunity. I guarantee that guy that said, I've got the money, but I need somebody to run it. He's like, I'll give you some equity. And what a life lived, 60 years old. You weren't number one. You were a CFO. You might have been number 2 or number 3 or number 6. And the call comes in, and an opportunity to probably change your life and change your family's life forever.
Yes, sir.
As long as you execute and do this thing the right way.
Correct.
So there's a message there for all of us. Put your head down, work hard, do the right thing, treat people well. Opportunities will come.
And when they come,
yeah,
don't be afraid to say yes.
Ooh.
Because I was a little, I don't want to say afraid, but I was
apprehensive.
Apprehensive. Good word. I was a little nervous, a little apprehensive. And this is the other thing I've learned in my years of experience is you always want to have a sort of your own personal board of directors, right? You want to have 2 or 3 people. It doesn't need to be 8, but a couple people who you can go to and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about that. So I went to my 2 peeps, if you will, and said, hey, I got this idea. And one of them, by the way, was the CEO of the company I was CFO. So he was number 1, right? And I was probably 2 or 3, as you said, in that organization. And I said, Nick, his name's Nick. I said, Nick, what do you think? And he says, you got to do it. I mean, that's the kind of guy who is supportive. Right. Said, you got to do it. And, my second person said, you'd be crazy not to do this. And so, here we are 5 years later. And Mark, I just signed up for another 5 years. So I'm going to, this will be my last hurrah, if you will. But I've told my wife, as long as I'm having fun, I'm going to do this.
You're a young 65, though, man. I don't say that just to give it. You're a young 65. You feel it. You know it.
Yeah, that goes with the sort of eating right, living right, outdoors, exercise, all the things we know to do to stay active and healthy, and as I said, and still have fun getting up every morning. I mean, believe me, I don't have to do this, but if it wasn't fun doing this every morning, I wouldn't do it. So.
What's fun mean? Because I bet, we could get into this idea of work-life balance and all that stuff, but what's fun look like to you? You put a lot of hours in still, because it's not just about time in the seat there in your office.
No, it's 24/7. I mean, I do unplug, right, and do all the things, the work-life balance. I unplug. I think it's important every day to have some time to unplug, and also to take a vacation for 2-3 weeks a year, and turn the email off and get the device out of your face. Having said that, what's fun? Fun is watching a young woman join my company at 25 years old and the light bulb comes on, you know? And when I say the light bulb comes on, oh, that's what you were talking about, or oh, I learned this, and then putting a team together and watching the team grow. And, I have a C-suite, right? I have number 2 and number 3 and number 4. And recently my number, we'll just call her 2.5, said, you got to fly at 65,000 feet, not 10,000 feet. And so being able to let go and let these people that you've sort of trained and brought up through the ranks, if you will, take over so that I can do my job, which is 65,000 feet, right? Strategic. That's fun to see that and watch that happen. And then in the industry I'm in, we're in a brand new industry. No one 10 years, well, let's say 10 years ago had ever even dreamed of what we're doing. And so watching the industry grow and being a part of sort of putting the bones and the meat and the structure around a new type of real estate is fun.
So let's talk about that. If it's so new, we don't know about it, it's novel. Tell us about it.
So what we do, and there are others that do this, it's a pretty new phenomenon, and there are a lot of reasons for it. We can get into those. We build entire communities for rent. So you're in Kentucky, did you say, or
pretty much Cincinnati? It's
Cincinnati.
a weird.
So I'm sure in suburban Cincinnati, there's subdivisions where you have 250 homes. Someone builds a little clubhouse. There's cul-de-sacs, right? And every home's for sale. We build those kind of communities, except every home is for rent. So contiguous community has a clubhouse, what we call an amenity, a swimming pool, depending on the size, and yet every home is for rent. And what that has become is a new way, particularly for 2 or 3 different demographics in this country. Let me back up, Mark. What spawned this industry, this idea, this business plan that I got was, Frank, we just haven't built enough homes in this country since the great financial crisis, right? We had all those mortgages, went bad. So we just didn't build enough homes. And we're, depending on who you believe, numbers are numbers and everybody has opinions, but somewhere between 3 and 6 million short on homes, meaning we have people who want a house. Yeah. That can't get one. Mm-hmm. So that's the supply side of this. Then you have an aging population. You have boomers like me getting into their retirement years. And then you have millennials coming out of, starting in their 30s, mid 30s, thinking about having children, although they're doing it later. But typically those kids, as I call them, live in an apartment and now they want to live in a house, right? Because either they're having children or they just want more room, forgetting the pandemic, which just poured gasoline on people wanting to leave, that 2-bedroom apartment in a high-rise building where you're sharing walls and corridors and all of that. Even putting that aside, there was still this trend of getting out of an apartment and into a home. But then you look at homes today, a starter home, most people can't afford it. They can't afford a 20% down payment. They can't afford the mortgage at current mortgage rates. So they're renting. And what's happened in the last 3 to 4 years is our home, we deal in starter homes. We deal only exclusively in brand new 3 and 4 bedroom starter homes. Those homes today, depending on where you are, range from, let's say, $300,000 to $400,000. Probably in Cincinnati, they're $300,000 home. To rent one of our homes versus buying one, same exact home, granite countertops, stainless steel appliance, nice home, fenced backyard, 2-car garage. We're about 50% cheaper on a monthly basis than buying that home because of all of the things we've talked about. Lack of supply, high mortgage rates, high down payments. So that's what's driving this business. Then you have a cohort of people, whether they're millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, even boomers, who are what I would call renters by choice, meaning they don't want to own a home. They don't want the responsibility. They don't want the money tied up in it. I remember starting this business. I asked my daughters, I have two daughters in their 30s, do you want to own a home? And they're like, Dad, I don't know that I do. I mean, they have friends whose parents lost everything in the GFC, like whatever equity they built in their homes got destroyed. So their idea of building wealth, which is the traditional baby boomer, get married, have a kid, buy a house, and over the next 30 years, you'll build up some wealth and some equity in that home. And that has been true for a lot of people, but it's also not been true for a majority of people. In this country, roughly 35% of people rent versus own. It's 2/3, 1/3. That's been true for the last 50 years. So it fluctuates a couple of
Home
percent.
ownership rate is somewhere between 55 and 60% of people, right?
Right. And so the rest are renting, whether they're renting apartments, mobile homes, manufactured homes, whatever.
Something. They're paying someone rent.
Right. So what's happened today is that is much more affordable than owning. And there is a cohort in this population that are renters by choice, meaning I may want to live in Atlanta for 3 years, but I may want to transfer to Cincinnati for whatever reason, job change, whatever. And this gives me the flexibility. The other thing is when my toilet's stopped up, I just go on my phone and go on the app and someone comes and fixes it, as opposed to I got to call the plumber, right? Or my lawn gets mowed, I don't have to mow my lawn. This is no maintenance lifestyle is huge with both young people and older people. That we have roughly 1/3 of our residents are empty nesters for the same reason. They sold their home, cashed out, put it in, whatever investments, and they just don't want to have to hassle with the burden of home ownership. So this is a very new product, a very new type of business. But I think in the next 30 years, that percentage of home ownership is going to decline and become more like in Europe. Like in Europe, I think it's half, maybe less than half. A lot more people, just because
homes are handed down from family to family in Europe.
Right. So I think renting is a long-winded way. This business has legs for the next 30 years, and it will become what has happened in the apartment business, where there's these big companies that own a majority of these homes and professionally manage and operate them. And it's just an alternative. It's an alternative to owning a house.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, like, can they both be really good options?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I don't want to put my real estate hat on, because I'm not a guy I'm not argumentative about anything, but I'm a guy who debates things.
Mm-hmm.
And I debated to say, okay, like let me put my cards on the table and show my hand on why I think this is really good. And then you put yours. What I know is that I have some buildings. I don't have big buildings where there's a few apartments, and that works for people at different times. But I still do have this. Maybe it was because I grew up maybe with less than. We can call it poor. We can call it humble means, whatever it is. So many people did. So many people that accomplished big things in life came from that. And maybe everything that drives me every day is just this idea of freedom in all parts of my life. And when I get up every day, because growing up poor, I felt financial constraint all over. And you went through it at 15. You went through something at 15 that was my entire life.
Yeah, I paid for my college education. I'm a self-made guy, so I understand what that means. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's something about waking up in the morning and not being concerned about bills. And I've had that in my grown-up life also. I started this real estate company 3 months before the housing crisis. Thought it was a great idea, and everything was on the line, and I'm weeks away from bankruptcy and just total disaster. And there's a whole nother podcast about grit, determination, perseverance, and how you make things happen. But there's a lot of good things when people own a home too. But I do understand this idea of the ease of renting.
Well, and I'll tell you to your point, Mark. Rentals in this country, this is a big misconception. A lot of people think, oh, there's these evil sort of Wall Street corporate owners. But when you look at the ownership of rental units in this country, 95%
Yeah.
of the rental units are owned by people like you who
Yeah.
own 4 units, 10
Yeah.
units. And, they've invested some hard earned sweat equity and real dollars,
Yeah.
and, are building, if you will, wealth that way.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you like these conversations, be sure to follow The Necessary Entrepreneur on your favorite social media platforms so you never miss out on engaging content. Here's what I want the Richard Rosses. This is my ask. So you have 20 years on me. So this is what I asked the Richard Rosses to do. I'm on board with people renting and being renters their entire lives, as long as they have a financial plan.
Yep.
Because I don't want them to wake up at 60 and 65 years old and have nothing.
Which unfortunately is happening too much today.
Yeah. So that's the only ask for everyone. It's not just about renting a home, but it's the same thing about always upgrading everything. It's the same idea about when you pay off a car, it's time to upgrade the new one because I don't have a payment anymore. It's like, hey, how about you go 3 years without a payment?
Right.
And you save some money. And so that's the ask is if you take that extra 50% that they're saving from renting, save the 50%. Invest it. Do something with it. Actually make the argument worthwhile. Because if all you do is go spend it on material things and it's gone, the argument for renting's out the window.
For sure. And look, we do things at Quinn to help our residents do that. We've just sponsored a financial education in one of the local high schools in our community where we've, paid for a curriculum and someone to teach what you talk about, how to teach. Yeah. I never was taught how to do a budget, right? Yeah. Or how to save money. I mean, it seems crazy, but I taught my children how to do that only because I hadn't been taught how to do that. Mm-hmm. And then we also we do things with our residents like positive credit. When you pay your rent on time, we actually send that to the credit bureaus because a lot of the issues we have, there's about a third of our residents who would like to buy a home. The problem is they can't because they don't have the down payment or they don't have the credit score. So we do try and do things to help those of our residents that want to save money, want to buy a home to do that. And I think that's important for all of us is to help people understand that you don't want to wake up at 60 or 65 and go, oh my goodness, I have $900 a month Social Security payment and I need $1,500 a month to live.
And it's time to go to work again when this isn't what life was supposed to be.
Correct.
So. When you had to make this decision, I'm jumping back.
Yeah.
At 60 years old, and you called your board of directors, your couple people. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there were some conversations with some friends and different things too. Like, am I really going to do this over a nice drink or a dinner? But do you think subconsciously you were thinking back to being 15 and if things don't work? Was that a part of the questioning maybe? Or no?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it was 15 because there were a couple of those sort of milestones in my life. I had one, certainly that one at 15 where I saw my father. And by the way, Mark, I don't know that emotionally he ever recovered from that devastation.
He probably didn't.
Yeah, he was 50 at that age. And so, I think for me, I knew that I was going to be okay, even if it didn't work, right? And I don't know that my father had that choice when he and his brother made this decision to invest this money. I will tell you, I've never signed a loan personally since.
I was going to ask that about personally signing. Yep.
Yeah. So I did learn a lesson there. So to answer your question, yes, I thought back to that milestone. There was a milestone in my 30s and one in my late 40s that we won't get into. But yeah, I said, what if this doesn't work? And I thought, no, if it doesn't work, I'm going to be fine. But think about what a difference we can make. Meaning building an organization. You go through life and I probably had, 8 different sort of careers or jobs, if you will, positions. And you're like, wow, if it were me, I would have done it differently, right? And so when you get a chance to do it differently, it's like, well, let's put my money where my mouth is and see if it really works. And for the most part, it has.
Yeah, so that brings up this idea of what relationship do you have with regret?
I try not to have a relationship. I mean, meaning, you know, I I think I can lay down, at the end of every day and say, look back and say, would I have done a couple things differently? Maybe. But then I also, everything I've done has led me to being sitting here talking with Mark on a podcast that, 10 years ago wouldn't have been an option. So,
Mm,
not a big regret guy.
yeah, I think that's the right answer to have a healthy life, mentally and emotionally. But personally, my take on that is I always used to say the same thing where, well, I wouldn't have done it different because I wouldn't be sitting here. But once we've learned, we do the next things different.
Correct.
So if that guy would have known, he would have done some things different.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't have a problem with saying that. He would have.
No, look, I joke with people
I'm
all the
saying me.
time, right?
Yeah, I'm not putting
I'd
that on
love to
you.
be
Yeah.
35 and know what I
No.
know now,
Yeah,
right?
wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I don't know what life would have been, but we still would have created an amazing life and maybe impacted more folks and maybe gotten to it quicker. And maybe you're not sitting here at 65, maybe it's 58 and you have the life you have. Because all this relationship with time, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you think about that?
Some, some, meaning, how many years do I have left? And,
And what
what
do we
am I
do with
going
it?
to
It's
do?
the most valuable
Yeah.
commodity and asset that we
Yeah,
have.
I do say to myself, and we're getting pretty deep personal here. Roughly two thirds are behind me of my time on this earth, and so I want to make the best of the last third. Am I doing that today? Do I believe that? Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you believe that on the 50% of your life that's business and 50% personal, but to go together? How do you think you're doing your best life work? We've talked about Quinn Residences. What's the future hold here? If it's 3,900 homes or it's 5,200 homes in 39 communities, what's it look like? What's 5 years look like? What's it look like when you're all done? Is it double? Is it 2x? Is it
So
3x?
it's definitely 2x, and it's whether that's 3 years, 5 years. I don't think it's more than 5 years, because I do want to have some time with my health to enjoy the fruits of my labor and spend time with my children, and grandchildren, and do some things that economic success will allow me to do. But I also want to leave something for this team I've built, right? Because there is that. I mean, I have now close to 90 employees, and I'd love to see uh, them take over in whatever form or fashion. Whether it's the CFO or the COO step up to the CEO, and everybody rises up, and to watch this thing become a legacy, right? And one developing an industry that's in its infancy, and see over the next 20, 30 years how it all kind of matures.
So I believe you love exotic travel.
Somewhat.
All right. That seems like you're downplaying that a little bit. Give us what's still on the bucket list of exotic travel.
Well, I'm doing a trip. South America, is Africa, an African safari. Like to spend some time in Southeast Asia. Those are really the three big bucket list things. Not really want to climb Everest, although I don't know that anybody wants to do that anymore when you read about all these traffic jams. Um, but I do like when you say exotic. I want to see the parts of the world that I haven't seen. And when I say that, I real simple, basic. I just recently went with my daughter on a little trip to Yosemite National Park, and when you go to places like that and you are actually see them, experience them in person, you can look at photos. It's kind of like the Grand Canyon. Have you been to the Grand Canyon?
No, I'm 43 states. I haven't been to the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. But you have places where you saw a picture of Niagara Falls, let's just say, and you see the picture and you're like, wow, that's really cool. But then you get there and you look at it and you feel it.
Top of Pikes Peak in Colorado, different places. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. And you're like, wow, I had no idea. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that makes an impression on me. And that's why I'd love to go see the Big Five in Africa and, see Patagonia and places that are still.
I was going to ask that. Is South America, is it Patagonia? Is it Machu Picchu?
Yeah.
Is it traveling down through Argentina? Is it
right? The Falklands, that kind of stuff.
Other than the momentary endorphins popping from seeing those things, what else do you think? What's it going to do for you? Are you going to learn something? Are you going to grow?
It's an appreciation and an understanding of something bigger than ourselves, right? You can make it religious, you can make it spiritual, you can whatever, but I believe, we're just this tiny little speck in time. And when you look at the universe, right, how many billions of stars there are. And so when you see places like that, and you go to Pikes Peak or you go to the Grand Canyon, there is a divinity there that you can only appreciate by being sort of in it and immersed in it. And so
we're awful arrogant to think we've got it figured out all the time, don't we?
Right. Well, I have this joke that I tell people all the time. I said, we make plans and God laughs.
It's not fun to be laughed at.
Right. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
100%. It's like, listen, that plan it's not going to work out. It's not going to happen that way.
Look, I said I wanted to make my first $1 million before I was 30, and that didn't happen.
How long did it take you?
A little bit longer. A little bit
40?
Mid-40s.
Okay, good. What's on your mind here? I really am. I'm looking at I feel like I'm an old 45. We could go into that if we were sitting around. I have an unhealthy relationship with work ethic. It's actually, but most people would say it's positive. I have an unhealthy relationship. I just don't stop. But I smile every day like you. Mm-hmm. And I get up and have passion and energy. And so I'm an old 45. Maybe one day I'll reverse that. I don't know. I built a nice gym in our office building here for everyone else. I just don't use it enough. I clean it. I help clean it. I do the laundry in there sometimes. We built a nice deli that has some healthy stuff, but I like some of the unhealthy stuff. Where's your mind at here at 65? You said 2/3 is behind you. You're in good shape if you've got a full third ahead of you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I look at you and I'm like, you've got a shot because of the way you look in your mind and how you're thinking. What do you hope you see in the next 30 years?
I hope I see better things for my children and my grandchildren and the world at large. I think, the current discourse in this country and in the world is we got to find a way to agree to disagree and all get along. I think we will get there. So for me to be able to see that before, I take my last breath would be really nice. And to maybe recognize that we aren't the end all be all, meaning us as the human race, I think it'd be really cool. I don't know that this is going to happen, but to find out that, there is somebody on Pluto or, you know what I mean? That'd be kind of cool. If we're like just spitballing here, don't know if that'll happen. I'd like to see us travel further out into the universe, solve some of the problems here at home. Yes, you can debate, climate change and all of that, but I think we've not been good stewards of this planet, and we need to get serious about taking care of our home base, if you will. Not just running away to the moon or whatever, which I know some people are talking about. So I don't know.
The problem with that, we're not good planting trees that the which of others will benefit from the shade.
Yeah, no, and that's a lesson I've learned. We have many of us, I won't say everyone, have a real short-term mindset. It's like these public companies that what's your quarterly earnings, and what have you done for me lately, and next month, I want to have that first million by 30 mentality. When one of my in my previous career, we were backed by German equity, and they have a much different vision and timeline, right? They think generationally. To your point, plant the tree now and watch your grandchildren sit under it in the shade. And so I think that's something that I would
100%
like to impart. It's not just
we're trying to counteract human nature to ask that of ourselves, isn't it? To really pay attention to the planet.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I sit here, I look out my window, I plant when I built this home that I laugh that I'm going to be laid to rest in. I planted 2 maple trees, one for each of my biological daughters, and those trees are 5 years old now, and they're getting big. So, my hope is that their children's children's children can sit under those trees one day and think, "Oh, great grandpa, planted those things."
What do you do now? What do you do now as a CEO with all this life experience? What do you do to continue learning? Do you read books? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you watch shows?
I do read books. I do listen to podcasts. I have a commute. I live in the Smoky Mountains and I work in Atlanta. So I have like a 2-hour commute 2 days a week, right? I go down and spend 3 or 4 days in Atlanta where I have a small apartment. So I listen to podcasts. I think that's a great way to learn. I watch what other people do, right? And I listen to what other people say. And that's something that's fairly new, I would say, in the last 5 years. People I admire, whether that's in business or in personal matters, and pay attention to what they say and do. Reading's good. Reading for me is more escape. So if I need to unplug, I'll read a novel as opposed to, a business book. There's so much content, as they say, out there. I just try and sift through the best I can. I do pay attention. People say, "Oh, I read this book," or I listened to this podcast, and that's been really helpful, right? Because just going online and looking at content, it's too much. Like I would have never met you had not, we gotten connected by the firm that connected us, and I might go back and listen to your Grit podcast now because we've gotten to kind of know each other, and I want to hear what Mark has to say about this, or some of his guests have to say about that. So that's
we're getting better.
That's how I learn.
I learned by doing too.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I wish we didn't need to fail, but man, I really, not just to go along with everyone else says, I just don't learn by winning, because it's like, well, I won. Now I know how to do that. I just don't learn anything new by winning. Usually I don't.
Yep.
I learned something by things not going well all the time.
Well, that's really how my career started. It didn't go well for my dad, but I've had, as I've said, 3 or 4 of those incidences in my life, and I'm much better for them.
Is there a business guru? We have these big names out here, even ones that are still alive now, the Bezoses and the Elon Musk, but there's Jack Welch's from back in the day. But do you know the Steve Jobs story well with Apple?
Not well, but I know it.
I read the book, the Walter Isaacson book. It's a big, thick book. So I read the book, and very controversial now in the way that we approach and see leadership anymore. And, he started Apple with pretty much him and Steve Wozniak, the brains behind the operation. And then Steve was the marketer and thinker and creative and visionary. Wozniak still admits to this day, everyone knows, like, he was the nice guy. Steve wasn't so much. But Wozniak still admits to this day, without Steve, Apple wouldn't have become Apple. What do we do with that? Because he wasn't a nice guy.
Well, I mean, you can look at history, and there are a lot of guys like that. I mean, there's a guy out there now who's building rocket ships and electric cars who, some would say, I'm talking about Musk, isn't a nice guy.
Yep.
But you can't argue that he has changed the world. I mean, I
He's
often
benefiting
wonder,
society.
I often wonder this device, like,
Yep.
this is going to tell you how old I am. I mean, you remember Star Trek. Maybe you don't. We're talking pre-Star Wars, right? Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
Like, is this
Beam me
is
up,
this
Scotty,
the,
right? Come on.
right? Is this the communicator? Like the Gene Roddenberry, when they flipped the thing up? What came first? Did Woz and Jobs watch those shows as kids and say, I'm going to create something like that? Because that's essentially what this is. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is a place for that sheer determination that can come across as being a bad guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think those people they're massively misunderstood. And I'm not saying their approach is perfect, but they're misunderstood because what I believe from reading the books and some of the things that I feel inside is that some people just have an inner determination and a commitment to achieve an outcome at all cost that that doesn't exist in most.
I would agree. That's not how I, went through my career, and but I have a lot of admiration for those people who were game changers. And you're right. There's a list in our lifetime and 3 lifetimes ago, and there'll be those people that come, in the next millennia that are game changers.
Yeah. I think what we should maintain in society, I think that we should just understand, like, hey, guys, their lives are not easy either. They have weights on their shoulders and pressures that we can think we can comprehend, and maybe we have a little bit of it, but they live lives, what they wake up to. They choose it every day, but they have so much responsibility that I don't think there's probably not many of us that can really comprehend. And they continue to get up every day and to try to push their thing forward. And the benefits that I receive from having an iPhone like you, that's tremendous.
Right.
It's incredible how better my life is because of that device.
Yeah. And I have to say, I have this story. There's been a couple people in my life who are like way smarter than me. Like and you see that. There's a guy, I tell this story. I was sitting in a meeting and he was espousing all of this information. And like 2 days later, I finally caught up to his intellect. And I was like, oh, that's what he was talking about. And people like that. And that's who Steve Jobs is, and Wozniak. And, you can say Musk, and people like that are just brilliant. Einstein, right? And whether they're in business or Nobel Prize winners. And you're like, I just can't sort of, how can I say, it takes me a while to catch up to those kind of people.
Yeah. What about, what do we miss about, I love to get to know Richard today. It was awesome. I think people listening will walk away knowing you. What else about Quinn? I watched a YouTube video where you guys had a segment on the Today Show about a year ago. And I watched that for 2 or 3 minutes, and I think I fundamentally understood your business.
Yeah, I tell people the thing I like most about that, by the way, 2 or 3 companies turned down that opportunity because they were afraid of what negative things might happen. And I
look at the comments. There's some people saying some nasty. There were some people saying some nasty things. I read the comments. You can't worry about the comments, but I read them. But kudos to you guys for doing it.
But I was like, this is an opportunity to showcase what we do and why we do it. And when you listen to the interviews, right? You watched it, so
there's two families.
Right, they interviewed 2 families, and those interviews I point to today, 18 months later. That's why I'm in this business. There was a state trooper, a 25-year state trooper, had a special.
I knew he was a police officer with that haircut. I knew it.
Yeah. 25 years, couldn't afford to build a house, wanted to build a home, couldn't. So they were saving money, taking that 50% of their rent, putting it in the pocket so that he could achieve his dream of building a home for his family. the Hispanic family in there, he had just bought three local chicken franchises and wanted to live in the middle of those franchises, entrepreneur, because he wanted to turn those around, but he needed to be in a certain location, right? So he could visit his three businesses. That's what we're providing is opportunity for families like that. So that's what that sort of program, if you will, that interview allowed us to showcase. And that's why I'm in this business. I think providing opportunities, choices for people in housing is critical. And as this country grows and as the shortage of homes is not going away, I just got some new data. I think in 2023, we formed 1.7 million households. That means Bobby and Sue or whoever get married and they form a household, they choose to leave the nest, but we only built 1.4 million homes. So the problem is getting worse, not better.
It's a huge
so
issue.
Many opportunities to solve that problem. And Quinn's just a small part, but we're doing a small part of adding opportunities and choices for people and how they live.
So go watch. I saw it on YouTube. So go watch it. You guys have a great following on your social media. You can find if you're a business-minded person on LinkedIn. But kudos. I think that what I love about our country still, I'll debate people all day long about this place being awesome or not. Yeah, it's a great awesome country. Yeah, it's like whatever, Yeah, I could talk about the flaws about our lives. I could talk about the flaws, or I could talk about the good things. I decided to focus on the good things and the positive approach and how I want to live my life versus all the damn issues that rise up every day. So, but overall, I love the marketplace. Build a product, start a business, and let the market choose. And if it fits what they need in their current moment, then great. You just provided the service to the marketplace. If not, the market will reject you. I love that. So, and we still have that environment in our country, which is awesome.
And there are not many that do, by the way.
Yeah, there really aren't. And I think that's what people just lose sight on that. I was able to travel a year and a half ago to Europe. It's the first time I've really traveled outside of the country. Southern Spain, went over to Morocco, and stopped in Paris. And I mean, it was cool to see all those places and be on Mediterranean. And I mean, it was neat. But I just left every one of them just saying, like, this is neat, but, man, home is awesome. Home is nice. I just know that if I act right every day, if I act right and treat other humans just with this mutual respect until they show me they don't deserve it, if I just wake up and do that, I have a good experience in our society. The average person, unless some stupid crime that someone commits against them, another individual, another citizen. If you just treat people with respect, just follow the rules, man. We can all bend them a little bit. You're going to have, for the most part, you're going to have a really good life. So that's me and you. That's examples of me and you sitting here.
Yeah, and I tell people very similar thing. Just do the next right thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
See,
what's the next right thing in front of you? That may be, getting up in the morning and, taking a walk around the block, right?
Yeah. All right, so Richard says just do the next right thing.
There you go.
Why the hell do we even sit here and talk for an hour or whatever we did if we just should have done the next right thing?
Because we were having fun and getting to know each other,
Hey, thanks for coming on. I think your business is different than mine, but at the end of the day, it's serving the community and it's in real estate. And I love to sit and talk about people that I think have good hearts doing right things. So thanks for sharing. Thanks for coming on, and it's just good to have a good individual on the other end of this thing.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.